Hello and welcome to TribalTalk, a short form discussion show from TribalScale, creating open discussions for tech topics and beyond. I'm Nicola Watson, HR Manager at TribalScale, and today I'm joined by our fabulous Chief of Staff, Heather Page. So thanks so much for joining, Heather, and I'm excited to chat about what we're going to chat about today. So if you haven't heard the news, TribalScale was recently named on Fast Company's Best Workplaces for Innovators, a list which was a massive, huge accomplishment and honor for us here. Today, we're going to dig deeper into the topic of building a culture of innovation and how we do that at TribalScale. So let's dive straight into it. So the first thing I think we should talk about today is defining innovation and what that means to us. Innovation is a buzzword in the tech industry that gets thrown around a lot, but it means different things to different organizations. So Heather, I suppose the question that I want to ask you is, how does TribalScale define innovation and what does it mean in the context of our company culture?
Oh, big question. Yeah, innovation, definitely a buzzword, not even just in the tech industry. I think the more I read, I just see that word thrown about all over the place across all different industries. Everyone's trying to innovate and do different things. I think for us at TribalScale, innovation is about a couple of different things. The first thing I think is creativity, just coming up with new ideas, different ideas. But the second thing is bringing together things and solutions that normally you wouldn't necessarily see. So kind of taking that step back, not just creativity for the sake of being creative, but actually taking a step back, looking at a problem space or a challenge and saying, okay, well, how can we do this differently? Or how is this solved in a different industry or when the problem is slightly different? And what can we learn from that and bring it over here to these solutions? I think the other way that we do a little bit of innovation thinking at TribalScale, or the way that we look at innovation, is that it's about collaboration. And I think collaboration is a huge part of what we do internally as an organization, but innovation is also a big part of sort of our DNA at TribalScale, our CEO Sheetal's DNA, and how he brings his network together. And I think anyone that knows him knows that he is a tremendously strong connector. And if you go to an event with him, you are going to meet someone who runs a bank, and you're going to meet someone who is inventing a fintech that's going to disrupt that bank. And you're going to meet someone who's like doing something totally different, but might have the cash to help them fund a new innovative business together. So I think that sense of bringing people together with different ideas and creating the space for that to happen so that those innovations can happen, or so that those different ideas can come together and find ways to sort of say, okay, well, how do you approach this? How would you approach that? Okay, great. Let's actually figure that out together. And look, now we've come up with something new on our own. I think those are sort of the things that we try to live out in our organization. I think that's been a difficult part of adjusting to being remote, because TribalScale historically had a really pop-in office, and it was the spot to be. We wanted to really be the hub of the tech community in Toronto, and not even just the tech community. You know, there were people, there were actors that were like in town filming that were passing by the office. There were CEOs from banks and insurance companies, either in Toronto or other cities, that were passing by, coming in and hanging out in our office, and also startups that were part of our Tribal Studio incubation program at the time, our Venture Studio incubation program at the time, who were all working in that space together. And so I think that our office really created that. And so as we've switched to being remote, it's definitely been an interesting challenge to try to figure out, how do you still have that innovative culture of bringing individuals together without being able to just like bump into each other in the office, especially as people move further and further far afield.
Mm-hmm.
Even if we went and got an office right now, you know, some of these people that were coming by and visiting, they're not in town anymore. They live somewhere else. And so the scheduling of that actually becomes difficult. So I think, to answer my own question of how do we do innovation when we don't have an office, because that was one of the things that we were talking about in our application to Fast Company about how we actually approach this. There's some different cultural stuff that we do. So we also, first of all, we do events in person still in Toronto. We do them in Miami. We do them in New York. And again, our approach to the guest list is strategic, to say we don't just want people from one industry. We want certain types of individuals, people who are creative, people who are outgoing, people who have ideas, who are interested in problems, who are interested in learning. Let's bring all of them together, and no matter what their background, we know interesting things are going to happen. So usually if you're getting invited to a TribalScale event, you know the food is going to be good, the fun is going to be good, but the actual communications and the connection and the learning from each other is also great. And then internally in our organization, we try to find ways to bring outside experts into the company and chat about, hey, this is how I'm doing this is how I'm doing that, this is my business, this is how I'm working with AI, this is how I was disrupted. And we try to build things, not just around the this is my company that I built thing, but actually, giving a founder the space to talk about the struggles that they've had, the fail fast culture, the fail fast, like, hey, what did you learn from what you tried to do, bringing that into play as well. And sorry, I can just see a chat. Oh, I'm you in the chat. Sorry, Connor.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get me back on track now so this makes sense. So we do these lunch and learns. We do special guest Q&As where we bring in experts and have them talk about things. So for International Women's Day, we actually had someone who works for Ontario Creates, a friend of mine, Carolina, who works for Ontario Creates, and she came in to talk about what is sort of the connection between the type of art projects that the government is providing tax credits for and technology, and how are AR and art coming together, and what does that look like. So we try to be, as like, I guess, personnel managers or like operations people, we try to be a little bit creative as far as like who we're bringing in front of the team. We've had some really cool experts coming in talking about AI recently. And then we also, we have sometimes people coming from Shopify or other cool startups that are coming in. So that we try to keep the guest list there fairly dynamic. And, we also give our team space to connect with each other. So we do daily stand-ups where we talk about the news, and if people have things they want to talk about and present, they can do that. Our teams are always encouraged to do lunch and learns. So one of our colleagues is doing some really cool work on a streaming platform where she's actually helping redesign kind of interactivity for your streaming. So really, I think everyone kind of jokes that like, oh yeah, like when people watch TV, they're on their iPads all the time. And this organization and this product manager that's working with us is trying to like build products around that concept of, okay, you're on your iPad, you want to do 3 things while you're watching TV. Can you play games on the TV while you're watching TV? We're already doing that anyway. So how can we build that more into the actual streaming platform? So stuff like that. She actually did a lunch and learn. She's doing that work inside of the client, and that's really interesting. But we want the whole team to understand that, hey, this is what she's doing, and this is what's really interesting. And I think we always all want to understand from each other what's everyone interested in learning. So one of our designers is really interested in what's it going to look like to design for AR and VR in the future, right? This is kind of a new field within design. It's a little bit different. So I'm sure that all of us know that because he's talked about it so many times. And whenever I see an article or a video about that, I'm like, hey, I should send that to him so that he can have that on his radar, although he's probably already found it on his own anyways. So those are some of the examples of, how we look at innovation, and then what we try to do to sort of weave our approach to innovation into our daily operations as an organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with everything that you said there. And I think it kind of leads to the next thing about talent and making sure that, we're building that kind of culture of innovation from right when we hire our people. So I'd say it'd be important for you maybe to share our insights into strategies and values and that we look for when bringing new talent on board, and just ensuring that they kind of align with TribalScale's innovation-centric culture. Right?
Let me actually throw that question back to you, Nicola, because you're the HR person, and you're the one that's kind of guiding our team on how to hire, and you're training them on how to interview. I mean, I think just that alone, the fact that we have a set guide for this is how we interview, this is what we're looking for, these are the questions to ask, these are the types of answers we're looking for. If the answer is this is what you could say. Like, I think on the HR operations side, you've done a really good job of bringing consistency to that interview and hiring process so that we can start to say that, okay, this is who we want to hire for, and we're going to do that consistently so that we can start to really build an organization of like-minded individuals. I mean, you want diversity of thought and you want diversity of perspective, but I think there's a certain value or approach to work that we kind of aim for with the tribe. So yeah, maybe you could elaborate a little bit more on what are the values that we look for when we're hiring, and then also like how do you actually go about screening for that?
Yeah, like I think really my approach to this and with the team's approach is having in that HR screen at the start, they make it to the first HR screen, is asking questions that probes them. Okay, have you had any side hustles? That's something that aligns with kind of this innovative culture that we have here at TribalScale. Have you gone about yourself, gone in with an idea, gave it a go, and make some cash on the side for yourself in that innovation kind of mindset? So I think asking even questions like that definitely peels out those people and gives them the opportunity to open up and give you some insight and say, hey, it's okay if you have side hustles. We actually think that's a really great thing and we value it a lot here. And just to see if they are strategic and they are innovative and they're thinking that way. Because I think no matter what position you're in here at TribalScale, whether you're on the sales team, whether you're on the product design team, product manager, you need to bring that innovation to your day-to-day role. And I think everyone here at TribalScale does, or at least tries to do that. And hence why we got on the list. But anyway, I think like that as a start is just a simple question. What do you do? Also, I think is just kind of pry more into their own interests. Like, what are your interests outside of work? Like, what do you do? Give us some insight to your life. Like, what do you do in your spare time? Do you have no interest? Well, maybe that's not going to be the right person that we're going to get in here. But in the sense of innovation, like they could be, doing something really cool outside of work that aligns with what we're trying to do. And they might have contacts in the space. Then we'll look at kind of, the areas they've worked in before. Is that aligned with what maybe we're trying to get into in the future? And maybe have some contacts that we can reach out to and kind of use there. So I think really it comes down to simple questions and probing more into their experience and their interests and if it aligns with what we're trying to do here. I know that sounds a bit off the rails and a bit simple, but it's really not that crazy in what we do, right?
So I think it's a really good point about the interview process. And then I think one area that we add on to that, and I think it's something that you guys do consciously in the job screening process, but it's also something that we're kind of always doing as an organization as far as trying to drive alignment across the team with the managers. I think we try really hard at TribalScale to give everyone a deep understanding of our values so that they can look at them as sort of a roadmap for how to make decisions and how to approach their day-to-day. So there's goals, there's strategies, there's OKRs, all that type of stuff for like what's the type of work you want to do in this project or this quarter, whatever it is. But kind of a layer on top of that is our values. And I think a lot of tech companies or innovation companies try to talk about values and what that means. And I think at TribalScale, we are pretty committed to the values. It's something that I think we do talk about a lot. And I think we've tried to word them in such a way that they're very actionable and kind of come with this map of how to actually do things. And I think sometimes like the culture, and we hear this sometimes from new employees, it's like the culture that we're trying to build through these values is actually different. And I think you and I, especially, like we look at them so much and we talk about them so much that it just feels as though they're just very natural and straightforward. But depending on the type of organization you're coming from, where you went to school, where you grew up, sometimes these can be a little bit difficult. So I think spelling them out really helps people understand how to navigate this organization and what will make them successful. Even when sometimes they're needing to do difficult things, like there's, shall we say, parameters or guides in the values that call out like, that's okay, this is the way you're supposed to do it, etc. I'm again still hard to do to hard things, but the values that we have are challenge and collaborate, empowerment, resilience, and caring. And I think they really do reinforce each other. They go together as sort of a set that they kind of all work together to create something sort of greater than the whole there. And I think that's what makes them so effective. I mean, if you read through them, I'm not going to read them through them here, but the way that we lay it out, you have challenge and collaborate and all the other ones, and they each come with like 4 or 5 sentences that give examples of like what that actually means in practice and where you would see that. And I think like when we look at the team and what they do, I think that we do see that all coming into practice. And I think that we try through our culture to also sort of like reinforce that. I mean, we have a kudos channel, we have a fail fast channel, we talk about it on our company stand-ups, on our town halls and our all hands and all this type of stuff to really say, hey, here's an example of when someone did something that was a really strong example of our values, and look, now that this is done, way to go to this person. That story kind of makes no sense, but hopefully we can work with that.
And I definitely think you're right. I think in all the organizations I've worked in, from different sizes to different industries, I've never been or worked at an organization where I know every single value inside out and that we talk about it and bring it to the conversation in everything that we do. And like just what you said, I think we do a good job at that. And I think every individual here knows at least 3 out of the 4, if not 4 of the 4 values, which is to me quite a good achievement, considering there's a lot of organizations where a lot of the employees don't know the values because they're not talking about it. They're not bringing it into their day to day. They're not using it as you said, helping them to kind of navigate how to go about this organization and to make decisions. And I think ultimately,
Mm-hmm.
when I see everyone in different projects and in different teams that we work on, you can see those values come into play. And even on my own team, I can see it, and,
Yeah.
if some questions are getting asked to me, there's a challenge or a difficult decision needs to be made, I'll push it back and say, hey, you come with that idea, be empowered. That's our value. Go make that decision, and it's okay. We'll get through it. But you make the decision, come to me and present it, and then I'll give you the guidance on it. And I think, yeah, just back to it, it really is present in everything that we do, and I think that's so important.
Yeah. And I mean, I think to tie the values specifically back to innovation, I think the values are meant to do a couple of things. Number one, like speed up decision making or time to action, or reduce the risk that comes from allowing a problem to fester or
Mhm.
sit around for too long, which tends to happen in bigger organizations. And certainly, like, we're a bit smaller, we're trying to be more nimble, but even as we scale, we want this type of mentality embedded in our values so that we don't sort of get caught up in like, oh well, that committee will solve this, or like that person, that's their job to figure that out. Like, if you see something, say something. If you see a problem, let's figure out how to fix it. And I think the values are built with what would it take. Like, I think the values are built to answer the question of what would it take to build a culture of people who feel safe to innovate. And I think that
Mhm.
in this organization, we try to orient ourselves in that direction to say that if you follow these values, if you work in the way that we work, if you care about fail fast as a mentality, you're not necessarily going to go into a solution with the perfect solution, but you're going to just jump onto the field, try something new, see what you can learn, and do that, as opposed to spending 5 weeks researching something and putting together a deck and saying, okay, this is what I think we should do. There can be a time and a place for that, but I think fundamentally, as part of the TribalScale DNA, is this idea that you got to learn by doing, and
Mhm.
that is sort of the right way to innovate and come up with new things, especially when you're trying to be innovative, which is to say, come up with new ideas, come up with new solutions. Well, what are you going to research if it's never been done before? You just got to get out there and
Yeah.
give it a try. And so I think having this idea of resilience in the face of struggle and empowerment, like you said, to say, you know what, there's a problem in front of you. Don't look to the person next to you to say, how do I solve this? Come to the table with a couple solutions and suggestions for how you want to go about doing things, because that's often what people are looking for help with. And we want to be, for our clients, right, the source of solutions and the source of interesting and innovative ideas. And we want to help our clients build the similar type of culture where they can have that same mentality across their teams, because I think it creates groups of dynamic problem solvers. And that's what I think is going to be really important for businesses in the 21st century, and I don't know, beyond, but the 22nd century feels pretty far away.
Completely. And I think even if we go to challenge and collaborate, right? So one of our other values, collaboration and cross-functional teams are often key drivers of innovation too. So I think that value in itself can be spoken about so much. So I'd say maybe we should talk about how we here encourage collaboration across our diverse team of, say, in-house engineers, designers, and PM. So our delivery team, and how we encourage that across those teams.
Yeah, for sure. So I think there's a few different ways that we do it. Number one, we always just want the teams working together and understanding how each other do things. So when there is a project that we're working on, there's usually or always a product manager, there's a designer, there's engineers, and it's not as though they're working in silos. They're on Discord together, they're in Slack huddles together, they're getting to know each other. And we try to sort of do little icebreakers or whatever at the beginning of projects to set that tone and figure out, okay, these people are the team. And it's not to say that like the designer is involved for weeks 1 to 2, and when week 7 comes around and an engineer has a question, it's like, oh shoot, where did that designer go? They're not available, they're not going to help me. I think one thing that's really sets this organization apart, and I think I always hear this from people, either right when they've onboarded or even as they're in their exit interviews because they're leaving to go somewhere else, this idea of, I love working with these people, everyone here is so nice, people drop whatever they're doing at my request and they go out and they help me solve problems
Mm-hmm.
anytime I ask for help. And I think that like that culture of people caring about each other and being willing to help each other and rewarding someone who asks for help, as saying like, thank you for asking for help now and not letting this wait until 4 weeks later, that's a really good thing. And so I think the more we reinforce that, kind of the better. And I think that that's, so I don't know, so having that culture of like people being able to ask for help and getting it right away, that's one way that we do things. We
Mm-hmm.
also do different workshops. Like, we have sometimes the design team or the QA team will run a workshop for the organization to say, this is how we do QA and this is the best practice, or this is how we do this like one component of design and this is the best practice. And the concept there, because we do it for engineering as well, we'll have engineers run a lunch and learn on like TDD or whatever, because I think fundamentally, even if you're not an engineer, the concept of TDD, of like building your tests into the work that you're doing, build fail safes into the work that you're doing so that you can validate whether something is working or not. That's like a business fundamental that works across pretty much, that mentality works across a lot of different things. So we try to have these workshops or like 101 sessions for the organization where you can come and learn how does that particular team or department approach how they do their work, so that number one, as you're collaborating with that team, you have like kind of the context and perspective to understand what they're looking for. I think this happened with the QA team when I first started here. There was a team that was just like never getting their builds submitted in time to be tested. And so you would have this QA person who was kind of like chilling Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Thursday, Friday, they're working till like 10 p.m. and they're super stressed out. And once the rest of the team was kind of reset on this idea that your build is due on this day, and if you don't get your build done to that person, you're just making them do 2 days of work in one day because now you've pushed out the whole schedule. And I think that perspective, again, it's like, it's not just, oh, I didn't get my build done, whoops. No, that actually affects someone on your team and you need to care about that, and it makes a difference. So I think there's a human element to how we do things here. And I think we try to always reinforce that by helping people understand how everyone else's job works so that they know how to relate to each other. But even like I was saying with TDD, there's examples that you can get and insights you can get from how someone else works and apply that to learn something else in the way that you're either doing your own work or approaching a new problem or whatever it might be. So I think we try to do a lot of like cross department, cross team sharing, like knowledge sharing and process sharing, because I think there is sort of this mentality of we're all in it as a team. And if one component of the organization is struggling, then we all need to step in and help that. And I think it's easier to understand where someone might need some help if you understand what they need to do in the first place. So I think a lot of like cross-departmental education and knowledge sharing is really key, but also just helping people, giving people space to get to know each other is also pretty helpful for helping people feel connected to each other and committed to each other, especially working remotely, which can be a bit isolating sometimes.
Okay, so I think really what's important in TribalScale and what helps us drive a culture of innovation is our fail fast mentality here. As you know, in this world, failure can be often stigmatized, and it's really an important part of that innovation process. So I think it's important for us to talk about our approach to failure and learning from it and turning it into a positive experience for our employees. So maybe you could share an example of your favorite fail fast that you kind of have seen throughout TribalScale and give some insight on how we turn that into a positive experience.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's kind of like 2 types of fail fast that we see. One is like, oh, I forgot to like change the settings on my Zoom, and or I reset the settings on my Zoom, and then when I went to the meeting I had to like couldn't share my screen, like things like that, where it's like small stuff like, oh, I didn't double check the emails for typos before I hit send and it was like a really important email. Those are kind of like nice little reminders. Then there's like kind of the bigger, more serious stuff. A lot of times these come from the engineers. Now I'm saying serious, the engineers are going to be like, she's throwing me under the bus. But I think some of the more like the bigger stuff is like, I pushed code and I had like an apostrophe where I should have had a comma and it like broke the whole database. And then it was like, oh my God, this is so bad. But I caught it right away because I had, tests integrated or whatever it is. And that's fine. So I think sometimes there's the more dramatic ones, even like the more dramatic ones. Like I can't even think of a good one right now, but there's definitely some like bigger operational stuff where like myself or Sheetal might have like made a mistake that again, it's a fail fast. So typically, you can solve these things pretty quickly. So it's usually a fail fast has like a fast solution. So it's not the worst, they're not the end of the world. But my point is that by having that like channel in Slack where we have fail fast and people share these things like all the time, having those little fails, I think number one just creates this sense that like nobody here is perfect. You can always have a good chuckle over a fail fast. Like there's an insight here somewhere, but like you're not going to laugh about it alone. It's better to share it with the whole tribe. And that's why on our stand-ups as a company, we always talk about fail fast. Hey, what's your fail fast? Do you have anything to share? Like we're out here looking for how did you fail? What did you do? I think for a little while we were calling them learn fast because some people were saying like, oh, like I feel too scared to say fail fast. Like it's just the word failure. I can't even cope with it. So let's call them learn fast. So we went through a little period where we called them learn // fail fast. tongue twister. We call them learn fast / fail fast. I think now we're kind of back to the fail fast stuff. I think the other thing that really helps is that our CEO, Shidal, is very open about his challenges and his struggles. So, if he's having, difficulty maybe getting in the mindset to go out and crush a bunch of like sales emails, or he just like tries to balance a bunch of things and, drops the ball and he's like, oh, this is really frustrating. He shares that really openly. And I think having that shared at the top level kind of sets the tone that like, when something goes wrong, it's okay to just say it. Like, this was a screw up and I failed and it sucks, but this is what I learned and I'm sharing it with all of you so that you can learn it too. And you don't also have to go through the same thing that I went through. It's kind of like when you're a kid and your parents are like, here's my lessons and you should learn them so that you don't make the mistakes that I do. All kids do that anyways, but we're not kids anymore. We're grown-ups. And so we're in a space now where we can learn from each other's failures and respect each other's advice to say, okay, this person tried this thing and it really didn't work. If I'm going to try the same thing, maybe I'll chat with them first and see how I could do it better. So I think to really set that culture where organizations are comfortable to say, hey, this didn't work, or hey, this actually failed, or this has been a disaster. I think number one, it's having that like top level buy-in from the leadership team to have senior people be willing to go out and walk the talk and actually be open and vulnerable in that way. That's really what makes all the difference. I think, on the monthly team calls we do where we try to talk about, hey, these are our values and this is why we follow it, and here's a good example, that all reinforces it to give people sort of the toolkit to be like, oh, this is a fail fast moment, to actually recognize it while it's happening and to know that like you're supposed to put your hand up and say, hey, this isn't working, or hey, this code is not right, or like I'm stuck on this problem and I really need help. I mean, on the flip side, like if somebody comes to us and says like, oh, I've had this problem for 6 weeks and like I've just been hiding it, like then actually people do get a bit like, well, what are you doing? Like, what? Are you kidding me? Having that reaction built in, that's a fail slow. When we have that reaction, I think then that also reinforces it that like you're not in, you're not in trouble because again, this isn't school, but like the negative reaction is not about the problem. The negative reaction in that case is about, well, why did you wait so long? How did this get so far? How did this problem get so big before we started to identify solutions? And so then again, you're focusing on the solution. You're not getting bogged down in the like, oh, he said, she said, we're pointing fingers. They said, oh my God, it's more about, okay, that's fine. This is the problem. You've identified it. Fail fast. You should have identified this sooner, or fail fast. This is the issue. Let's keep it moving. But I think the fail fast mentality is also meant to help us orient ourselves towards a solution, to say like, don't dwell on the past. You made a mistake. It is what it is. Fail fast. Let's keep it moving. What are we going to do about it? And let's look forward about how we can solve something together and not be so focused on like what happened and why it happened. And yeah, sure, we do retros and postmortems to dig into things and get at root issues for sure. But in the moment of problem solving, it's not productive to be overly focused on the who, what, why, when, and where, and like pointing fingers and assigning blame. So I think that fail fast mentality just kind of helps us avoid some of that toxicity that could come up in organizations when you struggle to solve problems together. Because if you're going to be innovative and if you're going to try new things, one of the main things that blocks innovation is fear of failure, fear of risk. So you have to bake that fail fast mentality in to have like a release valve for when the inevitable happens, because you're trying new things. It's not going to work every time. So by having a plan and not saying like, oh, well, we're nice people, we're all going to get along, like when we screw it up, it's going to be fine. No, you have to have a set culture and plan of like, when it goes wrong, what do you say? And what is sort of the vocabulary and the roadmap for how to behave so that people can predict what's coming, because that is what gets in the way sometimes of people trying new things.
Yeah, absolutely. Fabulous.
I'm making myself speechless.
No,
Nicola.
there you go. You're innovating while you're going. Okay, let's move on to like the tech industry in general, because I think hopefully people who are listening to this want to take some insights away for their organizations and their teams. So we all know this tech industry doesn't hang around with one idea for too long. New trends emerge regularly and constantly every single day there's something new. So how do you ensure that your team stays ahead of the curve and continues to innovate in this rapidly evolving landscape that we have?
Yeah, so good question. Like, how do and should companies build innovation and creativity into their culture? How do you make sure that people have space to do it. I think number one, we're just
Hmm.
open to it. Number two, we talk about it a lot. So like I said, we talk about our values all the time. And number two, like if somebody says, "Oh, hey, I want to learn this thing. Can I get a subscription to ChatGPT so I can play around with something? Can I spin up my own, little AWS environment so that I can test out some new things that I was learning?" Or, we have a professional development budget program, so people on the team are encouraged to like take courses, learn new skills, try new things, and not only that, but then come back, have a lunch and learn, present it to the team, and share that knowledge with the rest of us. So I think that component of like creating the space for people to be able to try new things is important. We also on Fridays have a cadence of doing demos. So something that obviously is a bit more fun to do in the office when you can be like, having a beer or whatever. But at the same time, I think even in a remote setting, it's one of the opportunities that we all get to come together as a team, crack some jokes, look at each other's work, ask questions. And I think that's always a really interesting thing to go to, because even if you're not an engineer, just hearing the rest of the team talk about like, this is how I approached the problem, this is what I did, that's actually usually really a case where you see the values in practice, where it's like, oh yeah, I encountered this issue, I was trying to like troubleshoot this bug for 3 hours, and I walked away and I came back with fresh eyes and I spotted it, and it was the most obvious silly thing, and it was right in front of me the whole time. Fail
Yeah.
fast. I should have maybe asked for help or gone and done this on my, like, taken a break sooner instead of being overly like fixated on the problem. So I think
Yeah, but I
like the
also, sorry, not
conversation, we
to,
see that as useful. No, go for it. Interrupt
yeah,
me.
sorry,
Otherwise
not
you'll
to
never get a
interrupt you.
word in.
No, we're about as bad as each other. But I think as well, what's interesting about that is I love when we're sitting there and someone's demoing maybe, the work they've worked on, some feature they've worked on the last week, and they haven't encountered those problems. But everyone else, chiming in and giving their insights and how they would approach that issue and how they try to solve it. I think in itself, that creates a culture of innovation, right? Like you are demoing your issue, demoing your whatever code's not working or whatever problem you're facing within that work from the last week, but you're opening up to a stage of people to kind of bring their innovation and how they would solve this problem. I think in itself, that's innovation, right? Like with a group of
Yeah.
people, they're coming with new ideas and just different ways of approaching things. So I think that's a really important component, that when I'm on demos and I see them situations happen, that I'm thinking, wow, this is great. What a great cadence to have people bring their perspectives and their kind of problem solving skills to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a good cadence for like, again, getting to know how people solve their problems, understanding people's perspectives and their strengths, so that when the next time you need help,
Hmm.
you actually know, okay, maybe I'll actually go to this specific person. I mean, we also have like Slack channels where it's like general ask or ask this or whatever it is, and people pop in there with questions. And I think in general, the team has a culture of being pretty responsive to stuff like that. But I think we're also responsive to feedback. So something that like might seem small, but if someone says like, oh, hey, I think we should change all our meetings to have like these two parameters, or I think we should like stop doing this and start doing that, rather than like, okay, let's hem and haw, let's think about it, let's talk about it. Okay, sure, let's try it. And I think we try to
Hmm.
do that on the simple stuff so that people see those practices in motion, and they know that, okay, well, when it comes to a big project, I'm going to do the same thing. Like if I have a request for someone, I'm not trying to say, oh, here's 50 reasons why you should do this. I'm like, why don't we just give this a try? If we don't like it, we'll switch back.
Yeah,
And when people come to me with
true.
requests, I try to do the same thing. It's like, if you think we should do this, that you feel so strongly that you're even bothering to ask, well, let's do it. And if it doesn't work, we'll switch back. It's fine.
Yeah.
But I think, and you have to do that to create that resilience, because it's hard to do any of these things without practice. So I think a lot of what we do at TribalScale, within our values, within our cadences of how we learn from each other, are sort of based upon like creating that muscle memory for innovation, or creating muscle memory at least for the activities that make innovation more likely, more possible. And any organization
Completely.
can do that, right? Like if let's say you are, a 50-year-old family company or a 100-year-old family company, which lucky you, because there's not a lot of those, or you're from like a really old school industry, it doesn't have to be that trying to be more innovative. It's not necessarily about like bringing in a ping pong table and getting a huge budget to build like some sort of like Apple skyscraper in the woods type of thing. There are like little changes you can make to how you share information with your company, to how you talk to your colleagues, to what you provide with them, what you expect from them, how you react or how you respond to the things they say to you. Like, if you're getting requests from your employees, or you're making it very difficult to even receive requests from your employees, maybe you're never in the office and you don't check your emails, like, then nobody's ever going to come to you and say, actually, here's a big problem that we can solve, or here's my innovative idea of how we can do things, because you're just not creating that habit, that muscle memory, not creating that space. So sometimes it really is as simple as that, as like, I mean, I think if you're getting all your innovative ideas from like an employee suggestion box, like, probably not the move. But again, like, if you don't even have that in your organization, and then you're sitting around as a leader looking around saying, well, why doesn't anybody have any innovative ideas? Like, well, what did you do to create the field or create the stage to welcome that and to let people know that they would sort of be rewarded for doing that? Because I think most people, if you sat down and said like, hey, your job is you do this, 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 and this every week, what's like 3 things that we could change to make your job better or the customer experience better? I think that's the other thing too, is like, what's the end goal, right? And I think at TribalScale, again, we're talking a lot about our values, which really denote how we're meant to do the work. But fundamentally, our mission is to write the future. So we're thinking about, in all things, how do we make it so that whoever is working with this code base next, whoever is using this app in the future, whoever is, doing whatever, interacting with whatever it is that we've created as an organization and as a team, how do we make sure that the person on the other end of that in the future has a smile on their face and they're glad, and we're creating good things that make sense, that have a positive, lasting impact? And I think, again, if you don't have that sort of core mission to help guide you down that path, then you can sort of struggle to create innovation as well, right? We're trying to create innovation so that we can make the world a better place, so that we can create great products that people love. Because as the world becomes more digital, there's good apps and there's bad apps. There's apps that are easier for your mom to use, and there's apps that your mom's like, I can't possibly use this. And, we want to create the good ones, and we want our partners and our clients to be out there creating and offering and selling, some of the best digital technology that users have ever had, so that people are happy and they feel and experience the benefits of this digital transition.
Okay, so I think, to summarize, like, and to kind of bring this conversation to a close, I think what is important here is maybe, what tips would you give other organizations, out there looking to kind of start creating this culture of innovation and creativity? So they may too get on Fast Company's innovators list like TribalScale did. So I think, what would be the top 3 things you would recommend?
Yeah, I think the first thing you want to think about is why. Why do you want to create a culture of innovation? What's actually the goal? What is the point of it? Do you want to create a new business unit? Do you want all your employees running to you with new ideas all the time? And what do you want it to look like in your organization, so that you can kind of map out what are the different approaches that you want to take. If it's totally impractical for you guys to do some of the things that we do at TribalScale, then I'm not going to recommend those particular things. Now, I think our values are great, and I think our values are smart in the way that they interact with each other, right? It's not just about empowering people to give ideas. It's all these other components as well. But you have to look at, well, what does my business do? What do I want my organization to do? And what do I want to ultimately make the goal for my employees? And maybe you start small and you pick an area and say, I actually only want to innovate on the customer experience this year, and let's really focus on that. Because if you've never really been in an organization where there is a ton of innovation, then you might, like, you're better to start small. And that's kind of like the extreme programming methodology anyways, right? It's like, start small, try something, fail fast, and then innovate. Don't go design a 20-page, 200-page innovation deck and go to an innovation conference. Like, that's a waste of your time. But think about, what's an area where I can innovate? Pick a bunch of employees that you think might be interested in trying this, and get them to experiment and see what they can learn and what comes up. And if you, maybe even take a step back. If you think your organization is not innovative, go talk to your employees and figure out if they agree with that, number one, and number two, why they think that might be. And that's going to start to probably give you some ideas on some breadcrumbs to kind of help you become a little bit more innovative, I think. So number one, you want to just like assess the situation, come up with a plan to start small, and figure out what is going to be the challenge around innovation in your organization. Maybe you have a layer of managers that just like hate new ideas, and so, that's a pretty easy fix. Or maybe it's not an easy fix, because maybe it's a family company and those managers are your relatives. So I think figure out the situation first and understand then design an experiment to help you learn and practice at the component of innovation. And then the third one is, once you've learned all that stuff, figure out what you want to do next and what is going to be the plan that makes sense for you, and then how can you build that into your culture. So you're not going to go build an innovation plan and implement it right away, because it's not going to make any sense for your organization, but assess the innovation in your industry, assess what innovation looks like in your organization, and how do your employees feel about it. Design an experiment to give that a try, see what you can learn, and then you can come up with an actual plan to say, okay, if we do these 5 things, if we hire for these 3 qualities, or if we change these little components of our work culture, then we can start to move in the direction of being a more innovative environment.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. I think that sums it up. Okay,
there you go.
that is our final question. If we continue and we don't stop, we'll be here all night. So I'm going to be the adult here and stop us too. So again, thank you, Heather, for sharing all those insights. For everyone listening, you can find this fabulous episode and more of our Tribal Talk episodes on our YouTube channel. And stay tuned for some more inspiring conversations in this world of technology and innovation. So thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks, Nicola. Thanks, everyone.